All right, well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to another Ask Alumni Presents presentation. My name is Jeffrey Fouts. I'm the Associate Director of Career Services here at the iSchool. And tonight it is my pleasure to welcome Emily Harrington, an iSchool alum from 2021. Um, with a background that spans from UX design in the defense industry to selling chai lattes at a Texas farmers market. That would be a very interesting story to hear about. Her journey to cybersecurity and intelligence has been anything but linear. Currently, Emily is in her final year of graduate studies at NYU, where she's studying global security, conflict, and cybercrime. And last summer, she interned at MITRE, MITRE, a not-for-profit corporation committed to the public interest, operating federally funded R&D centers on behalf of U.S. government sponsors. Wow, so I'm hoping you can put some clarity onto that. Emily sponsored their intelligence center in the broader intelligence community. Her work involved investigating capabilities of foreign adversaries, creating vulnerability and system assessments, and conducting cyber threat intelligence research, which all sounds amazing. Emily will be starting full-time at MITRE, MITRE, after graduation in May. I believe you said you're starting in August, and will be a cybersecurity consultant for them. So please join me in welcoming Emily, and we very much look forward, Emily, to what you have to say.
Thank you. Quite the introduction. I loved that. And yes, like so many parts of my background are such a mouthful. So I'll definitely go in depth about that. Oh, I realize I'm not sharing. Let's see. Okay, share screen. Oh, okay. I think I sent you a request. Got it. Okay. Now, can everyone see my screen? Okay. So, as Professor Fouts said, thank you so much for the introduction. My name is Emily. I do a ton of different things, have done a bunch of different things. I love Syracuse. I love the iSchool. So that's what I'll be discussing today. So, quick agenda. I'll do an introduction, talk a little bit about my background in work-wise, Syracuse-wise, talk about, what does cybersecurity look like today in this crazy world? And from there, talk about some roles, a bunch of different roles from people who are technical, people who are non-technical, the government. What is the government doing? Why would you maybe want to work for the government? Who are some agencies that you would maybe want to go to, or some other companies that do work that helps, the people, the civilians. And then, I'll close out with some just, summary of what I've talked about, maybe some tips and tricks, and then we can get into questions and, feel free to use the chat as well. So, like Professor Fouts said, I went to the iSchool. I graduated in 2021. For some reason, Syracuse was my number one choice. I toured campus and I was like, I love gray skies. Like the Hall of Languages with like that cloudy gray vibe was just like speaking to me. But I really wanted to go to Newhouse and Whitman, and at the time I didn't even know like what those schools meant. I just like knew those were the two big things. And I kind of had an idea that I would want to work in sports when I was, graduating and starting a life. But I didn't really know anything, and I applied early decision to Syracuse. All I remember is waking up from a nap and getting my acceptance letter being like, you got in, and then 30 minutes later reading it being like School of Information Studies. Like, what is that? I did not even click on that. And that one moment, I think, turned out to be one of the best things that has ever happened to me. So I toured the campus again. I went to the iSchool and I was like, wow, this is the place to be. So, you're all in a great spot. My parents saw the graduate job placement rate, the starting salary, and they gave me the thumbs up to go ahead and join this great community. And so I started at the iSchool. And when I was there, we only had one major. So I was just an information management and technology major. And I had a Whitman minor, just a generic marketing whatever I think it's like marketing management minor. And looking back now, like it's so funny looking back now, I think I probably would have like maybe done a little bit of Maxwell. Like I just like had no clue. It's so funny looking back, but super grateful for that experience. I love that information management and technology major. You kind of dabble in a bunch of different things. When I was on campus, I was pretty involved. I was on the Women in Technology e-board. I think I was director of marketing one year and president another year. I was a peer advisor. One of my favorite things ever when I first came to Syracuse, I didn't know anyone, and like I think I like kind of freaked out a little bit. And I remember like going up to my peer advisor and being like, oh my gosh, like I don't like this place, but like I love my classes. And like obviously everything turned out to be great and grand. But if anybody can relate to it being a little bit of a hurdle in the beginning, I totally feel you because at first I was super stressed out, but I knew I liked my classes. I had to stick it out. And then obviously everything fell into place. I also joined Kappa Theta Pi, which is a technology fraternity I'm sure you're all aware of. I was part of the Alpha class, so I always like to say that. I'm like first people to join. I know it's really grown since, which is awesome. And I was also in Kappa Kappa Gamma, which is like the a social sorority. And I feel like while there, I was kind of like the go-to girl for like resumes and like you like really like telling people like you should at least add an iSchool minor. So those are some of the fond memories I have. And then when I left Syracuse, I moved to Austin, Texas, and that's where I kind of began my career. I did a bunch of different things. So I had landed an internship on campus my junior year with Lockheed Martin as like a data analytics role. And during my junior year, it was COVID, so it was pandemic. I was super grateful that I even had an internship. It was virtual and I had no idea what to expect, but I was kind of given the choice of projects to work on. I was asked what I like, what I don't like, and that was something that was really meaningful to me because I was like, what? I thought they were just going to throw me somewhere and I was just going to get experience and it was going to help me build my background. So I did a lot of dashboard building, I did a lot of wireframing, and it was overall an awesome experience. I came back my senior year, it was still kind of COVID, and I ended up working an internship on campus part-time for a startup. And that was where things really kind of like switched for me, where I was like, I can't work in sports. Like I need to like help stop bad guys. So while I was working there, essentially we were like a contractor to the government and social media companies. And I basically was like an internet stalker, being like, okay, this person is like manufacturing like a 3D gun and like selling it on TikTok, or like this person is like promoting Telegram accounts, spreading like Russian terrorism propaganda, bunch of different things. I had no real experience in any of that, but I had always been pretty good at navigating the internet. So some people would call it like an open source intelligence analyst. Everything was online. I was just basically going into weird pockets of the internet. So could be a little scary at times, just like you never know what you're going to get. But that startup ended up getting acquired and they're now the Microsoft Threat Analysis Center. So they still do a bunch of cool work. But they're a lot more known now. Before they were operating out of someone's garage in Cold Spring, New York, which is very COVID-19 vibes. So yeah, I moved to Austin. I was like kind of working that startup a little bit. I started full time as a UX designer, data analytics at Lockheed. And then I was also selling chai lattes because I was a little bit crazy and like I just wanted to get immersed into Austin, Texas. I moved there just for fun. And it was a great experience. I love Austin. If anybody ever likes like comedy or live music, that's the place to go. And I was working in this role and I felt like, okay, I'm no longer stopping bad guys. Like the startup is now Microsoft. I can't work for Microsoft and Lockheed Martin at the same time. So I was trying to find ways to pivot where I could kind of get back to looking for threats, looking for things that could maybe be harmful to people on the internet. And I was not really finding like a golden opportunity with jobs, whether it was government or private sector. And I found this government program called Cybercore Scholarship for Service. And essentially, it's just a program where the government allows for people to continue their education, and then in return, you work in, a government space, whether that be state, local, federal, or in my situation, a federally funded research development center, which is kind of like a lab. A lot of universities have them, like MIT Lincoln Lab is a pretty big one. And I just applied and I ended up getting in. So it was crazy. I was living in Austin. I had to move quickly to New York. It was like a 2-month turnaround. And now I'm in my second year at NYU studying global security, conflict, cybercrime. It's a huge mouthful, but essentially it's a bit like the human side of cybersecurity. I like to explain it like if international relations and cybersecurity were to like have a baby. I know back in the day when I was a peer advisor, I would always describe like the iSchool as like if a computer science major and like a business major had a baby. It blends on a bunch of different interesting things, similar with where I am now. So I take classes on like economic espionage, but then on Tuesdays, I'll be like in my network security class, like in a command line doing Python. So it touches on a bunch of different things, very similar to an iSchool degree. And then, like Professor Fouts said, I interned at MITRE this summer, which is a nonprofit, but it kind of is like a consulting firm. It reminded me a lot like that. It's very project based. I had 3 different projects, and all different clients. And a lot of my work was centered on, identifying threats and helping people in non-technical positions understand what's going on, what our foreign adversaries planning to do. And I'll kind of get in a little bit further about some of those things. And then, like I said, I lived in Austin. I'm in New York now, and I'm from the DC area. I'm not sure if I mentioned that previously, but if anybody ever wants to chat about any of those 3 places, I have a long list of Google Docs with recommendations and notes. I'm very type A. So, all right, getting into the bulk. So, cybersecurity of today. So, when I was in your guys' position, the only thing I knew about like cybersecurity was okay, people get hacked. And like now, I graduated like 4-ish years ago. It's like such an evolved space. So, some of the evolving threats that I have are like ransomware attacks when these big groups go for large companies and hack them in exchange for money. This is really big in the cryptocurrency space as well. Another big one is a supply chain vulnerability attack. So these are very prevalent nowadays. The biggest one I can kind of talk about is like the solar winds attack. So if like the 3 that I have listed down there, like really big, large scale attacks that happened on companies or critical infrastructure sectors where people we either were affected where they couldn't get their job done, they couldn't go places, like the systems were down. And this is when a malicious attacker kind of, for example, they inject malware into like a software update, and then from there they're able to gain access to more of the network or the system, and they can take people's data. It's kind of like they move from one place to another. They keep opening doors. Sometimes people refer to it as like a backdoor attack. So a lot of large companies use cybersecurity vendors, and sometimes this can be a big vulnerability when those vendors maybe don't have things patched and attackers are in the system and they see that, and that allows for them to inject some sort of malicious code for a software update, and then that allows for them to access other parts of the network, which can be pretty scary. Phishing campaigns, maybe this one is the most we're all familiar with. We get those texts and emails all the time, and they've honestly started to become more and more like harder to track and find, or like you don't know like what's real and what's not. And then lastly, our nation state threats. So the big 3 that I feel like in my workplace that people are always talking about are China, Russia, and Iran, as well as North Korea. And these are the governments, obviously not the people of these places. So these big, nation state threats, they have very, very good cybersecurity capabilities, and they're always kind of trying to like seek into systems and, either cause destruction, take data, or plot for like a further situation down in the future. And then, some emerging threats. It wouldn't be a discussion if we didn't mention AI. So I feel like people are talking about AI a lot with these powered attacks or deep fakes. So, I think the biggest thing that like we all might know about is like people I've seen on like social media where like these videos come out of like celebrities and they look really real, but like they're not real, and people could potentially use these in situations where it's very harmful, like for example, scammers are calling people on the phone and they're like, "Oh, it's your daughter," and it's not your daughter. They just were able to come up with like a fake voice and then trick people on the other line into giving information that could potentially, they could like go into a bank account or something like that. And then social engineering phishing, this is another kind of, I guess, step into the phishing campaigns where people again are posing as someone they're not. They're tricking people, and it's like really hard to detect if, it's real or not. The biggest one that I can remember was in Las Vegas. I don't know if everybody remembers when those like slot machines went down. And the way that all happened was because somebody in the IT room like got a phone call or an email, and it was like they thought it was a trusted party and it wasn't, and they gave them access, and then that was a huge ransomware attack, and had real world effects, people were there and lots of money lost. And then lastly, I've mentioned some of these already, but if you don't know anything about this topic, these like if you don't really care what I'm saying, looking up these three things I think would be really beneficial. This is what I tell everybody when I'm talking about this subject. I talk to my mom or my grandparents all the time, and they're not really too tech savvy, but I'm always telling them like you got to look up Volt Typhoon or Salt Typhoon or the Colonial Pipeline, because these are the things that like are the very big impactful that have happened. And these are the things that nation state threats are trying to, work towards. So the Colonial Pipeline was when the pipeline system basically had an attack and paused, and this had, real world effects. Nation state actors are planning or trying, I guess, to get into critical infrastructure sectors. So water, oil, gas, some of the other ones are like, the technology sector with like routers and all that stuff. And the Colonial Pipeline attack was attributed to Russian state actors. So I can't remember, I think it was like early 2020s, 2021, maybe 2018, something in that realm of when it occurred. And there was no movement of oil and gas. And the Volt and Salt Typhoon, big nation state threat right now is essentially Volt Typhoon happened last year, where these Chinese nation state actors were getting into pieces of critical infrastructure, and they weren't doing it to take our data. They were kind of doing it to remain in systems and prepare for a situation where they needed to cause chaos on the US front. So a lot of people in this space are always talking about the invasion of China and Taiwan in 2025, and say that these actors are kind of preparing for a situation where if that happens and countries seek to help Taiwan, they can kind of on the switch of a button, press a button and lights go down places, or email doesn't work, or phone doesn't work. And in the world we live in today, all of that stuff is readily available at our fingertips. So if we can't open up our email, people are going to go pretty crazy. And that's kind of the situations that they're preparing for. And Salt Typhoon is pretty recent. So this is a situation where similar Chinese state actors are trying to get into like our phones and telecommunication systems. And they were actually kind of lingering and targeting specific people to look at their text messages and phone lines. I think it was like obviously and not like the common man. They kind of had like a specific scope with who they were targeting. I think it was like government officials, people in the Treasury Department, and I think one of the other ones was the State Department. But it was really interesting though, because it kind of started a huge conversation in this space about like, okay, are our like text messages, like, is that data encrypted? Is it not encrypted? If you have an Android and you're sending a text message to an iPhone, like that data is not encrypted. And if a threat or like a threat or nation state actor, just somebody, a bad guy, I like to call them, wants to get that data, it's way easier for them to do it because it's not encrypted. So I was recently looking into this for a class. Like SMS text messages is like the worst type of text message. If your parents have green, tell them maybe they want to update and switch to, I think it's RMS. And that way, when you're sending text messages, that data is encrypted and it's a lot harder to obtain. So I know I just said a mouthful and I spit out a bunch of different crazy things. But I would say, in short, these are the biggest things that people are talking about in my work, the things I'm reading, trying to keep up to date when I go back to work full time and I know what everybody's talking about. But those three kind of like real world consequences that I looked up, these are always the things I tell people, like if you're going to take away anything, look into these things, look into Volt Typhoon, look into Salt Typhoon. in the Colonial Pipeline because they're really recent incidents that happened and not everybody knows about it. Like this past winter break, I was like visiting a friend in Connecticut and I was telling her parents about it and the whole Volt Typhoon threat was like with routers and basically all these routers threat actors were able to get into because they were end of life technologies, which means they're so old they can't get updates anymore. So it's like really simple things when you kind of dig into it, but like nobody really like is every day looking into this unless you're kind of working in this space. So if any of this interests you, or if you just want to make sure, your families are safe, you're safe, I would take a gander here. When I'm at like conferences or go to talks, these are kind of the big things people are talking about. And also, Volts and Salt Typhoon is just like a naming convention that the government uses for threat actors. SolarWinds is a company that was attacked, their Orion software, and then the Colonial Pipeline was just that was the pipeline that got attacked and was paused. So just some other things I realized as I'm talking, people may not know what I'm talking about. So just a little bit more information. This all might also look a little bit crazy, but these are the things that like I'm taking classes on and that I look at all the time. So on the left, these are the big nation state actors that I mentioned, China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. And what are they most likely type of cyber operations that they're conducting? So economic and political espionage are pretty much the big ones. And then on the right, these are just names of threat actors. I wouldn't even begin to look at that right now. I just kind of wanted to give an overarching landscape of like when you're doing these stuff day to day, like these are kind of like the big things people are either know or just keep in their back pocket. And then on the right, these are, some trends or threats that people have put out for cyber and geopolitical, things to watch out for. So, like I said, ransomware, like these things target hospitals a lot, small businesses, medium businesses, and can be really, really scary, especially for hospitals when, they have this attack, they can't get to their systems, people's lives are on the line. Other things I talked about was like, on the bottom right, the US-China tensions. So a lot of discussion right now with like the China-Taiwan invasion and China kind of doing some work on behind the scenes to prepare for situations like that where they need to cause chaos here if the US isn't really aligned with what um, their goals are. Like I said, Russian cyber influence campaigns and threats, those are always a big one. I know we just finished an election, but people are always talking about that with the election in the past that we've seen AI. Very, very likely that, this is just AI is such a rapid space where, yes, it can be used for good, where we can quickly do our tasks more quickly, more efficiently, but also while we're doing that in our workplaces, so are threat actors kind of using these tools to also, cause harm. So just a little bit more of a glance. And then next I'll go into, so why the government? So I never really thought I would want to work for the government. I just was like, they don't pay as well. And I don't know, I'm just from DC, so I was always anti like staying in DC. But these are kind of the big three things that have stuck out to me on like why I want to continue a career here, why I think it's cool to have a career in government. So first one, mission-driven work. So protecting national security and the public from cyber threats. Yes, you can do this at other places, but like the government is really all the place, like the one place that's kind of pushing pieces, and has access to all of that information, classified work, which I'll get into. So your work has a direct impact on policies, like stability of like the economy, the internet in general. So, like, example, this summer, I was working on a project about self-driving cars, which don't really know that much about, but I learned, and that's something that's very common. When you start in the workplace, you get sent on projects you don't know, but then you become an expert really quick. And like the projects that I was on, the direction was coming straight down from like the Biden administration and executive orders. So the Biden administration was very wanting to know more about how can bad guys hurt self-driving cars because we see self-driving cars are becoming more common, and little old me is just sitting at my desk researching like self-driving cars and like what does a system look like and like how can a bad guy do something. Like it just feels super cool when you're it's there is a chain of command obviously, but you're helping the people at the top who are trying to, keep everybody safe, things like that. And then skill development and career growth. So the government has amazing benefits. I know people like that was the one thing I always knew about it because I had, being from DC, a lot of my friends and family had parents who just stuck it out for the rest of their lives and they get a pension. There's opportunities to work in a bunch of different things from policy, cyber defense, intelligence, software engineering, and the career growth is pretty great too. There's like a whole job scale of like, you start at a level 12, but then each year you go up a step and then the next year you can get this. So you're kind of guaranteed to continue to grow in a lot of places and your salary continues to go up. There's a lot of mentorship programs. There's a lot of programs where if you've been in the government for X amount of time, your student loans get forgiven. So a lot of things that I never really knew about until I was kind of engaged in working with people. Um, and I think, it was pretty helpful. And then lastly, so classified work, something I also, when I was in your shoes, never even thought about, never really cared about, but it is pretty cool when, you're in meetings or in a SCIF, which is like a sensitive compartmentalized information facility. Basically, it's just the meeting where there's no internet, no wires to be going in and out. And you talk about things that the common man on the road doesn't know about. So it's a lot more detailed than what I'm saying about like bad guys essentially. And I think like I was saying, you can do some of this work in the private sector, but the government relies on the private sector for innovation. But I don't think like those people from in Google or Microsoft, like they're not able to have those conversations where it's like kind of laying out, okay, this is the biggest threat of today, and how are we going to fix it? So one thing that stuck with me last year, I went to a talk and it was a bunch of people from the intelligence community basically saying like, yeah, it's crazy. You work in like a classified space. Like you can't bring your work home with you, but it kind of creates a bond with the people you work with because they can't go home and talk about their work as much because of the clearances they hold. But it is kind of meaningful when, the work you're doing as when the public doesn't find out the work, that means, you're doing your job, like you did your job. If people aren't finding out about these threats, that means you're keeping people safe. It's like the worst thing when their work hits the front line of the paper because something went wrong and, everyone obviously has to know about it. But it just to me, I was like, that's pretty cool, like you create bonds with the people you work with, you're working on really, really intense projects that no one's ever going to know about. And that's good because then, you helped contribute something to some sort of success. So those are just some things that for me, I have kept me wanting to continue down this path. Um, and then so jobs in cybersecurity. So my background, would say I'm not super technical, but if I wanted to be, I could be. And I think that kind of aligns with certain people at the iSchool. I think if you want to be technical, you can get really technical. If you don't want to be technical, you don't have to get super technical. And that is similar with, the program I'm in right now in my master's degree, but also how I kind of plan for my career to be. So some technical roles, a penetration tester, these are people that are in the command line looking through logs, looking through systems and seeing movement and traction. These are the people that are hopefully going to notice something that's bad if there were to be an attacker in a system. Incident response analyst, these two work hand in hand together on if, there's somebody in the system, we need to get it out. They're going to kind of triage and work together there. Information security engineer and a threat hunter, these people as well. All of these roles, you're going to be in a command line more so. I think an iSchool degree is very like a triple threat in a way because you know how to do these technical things, but you're also learning how to communicate. So if you want to be in a technical role and you have an iSchool degree, I think you kind of have a one up because you're learning how to communicate while you're learning how to use tools. And then, pivoting to some non-technical roles, threat intelligence, cyber policy analyst, risk and governance. These roles have more of like focus on writing or communicating or briefing. And that's where I think for me, I work a little bit best. So sometimes it's giving a presentation to a government official on some sort of technology and companies in a certain region and why they may be a threat or why they may not be a threat. Risk and governance is something that I've seen become really popular. Compliance, these are people that are kind of crossing the T's and dotting the I's with making sure everybody across organizations are following guidelines. You know, if an audit's coming up, which happens more like right, I feel like I talk to people in these roles and it's like another audit already. Like these things happen very routinely. They're the people that are gonna kind of get everything together and keep all the like information or organization with information on how tasks are going or how, data is being held, things like that. And like a cyber consultant, which is the role that I'm going to be going into, it's very wide scope. So, I'll be starting on projects and I kind of am very lucky I'll be able to choose projects that I like, but I'll have a client and I'll have a problem and I'll be assisting on that problem, whether it's, creating a script in Python to automate something or building a PowerPoint to educate something or writing a paper on research, very kind of widespread. But I think that speaks out to me because it's like a little bit of everything. If I want to be in a command line, I can. I don't really want to be. I don't really have to be. So there's a bunch of different ways to go. And I think a lot of the friends in my program are very interested in the policy route, which I think people kind of forget about too. And then I'll continue on ahead. So where to work? This is kind of a bunch of different corporations, but on the agency side, the FBI, CIA, NSA, ONCD, which is the Office of National Cyber Director, which sits in the White House, CISA, which is the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency. They're a fairly new agency that's known as like the Cyber Defense Agency of today, the Department of Defense, and also state and local government. I feel like people forget about state and local government, but here I'm in New York City, and the New York City Cyber Command is one of the best in the business. The NYPD Intelligence Bureau and cyber threats are, again, one of the best in the business, and they also pay a lot better than you'd think in a lot of places. So all of these agencies have either like a cyber division or their main focus is cyber. So I just talked about CISA, which is a cybersecurity infrastructure security agency. Again, another mouthful, but they do a bunch of different things. And they are kind of the people that are behind like election security. And they are the people that are going to like schools in certain areas and making sure their systems are intact. So again, wide range of like being kind of either a customer facing person or somebody on the back end who's doing like red teaming and testing systems to make sure they're strong enough to withhold attackers. And then there's also the contracting side. So I know consulting is big in the iSchool. We all know like the big four, but so Deloitte, Accenture, Booz Allen, Leidos, MITRE will all be going. These are some other big ones that do a ton of government work. And I would say the biggest difference between, the contracting world and the agency world, when you're a contractor, you're kind of more focused on like innovation and building tools for the government to use. The government, as we all know, is rooted in bureaucracy and takes some time to get things done, or they don't always have the money or the time to build tools that help advance their investigations. So where I've been working, people always tell me it's like a proof of concept company. So I'll build they'll build something that helps, maybe potentially like digital transformation. The government uses old systems. They're working on a tool that helps, integrate all old data into a new system that's more safe, and like cyber compliant, things like that. And yeah, so I think there's pros and cons to both. But like I said before, when I was in your position, I knew none of this. So just kind of wanted to break it down. There's a bunch of different places to go. They're all over the country. So like if you want to work in LA, like all of these places have offices. I think that's pretty big pro too. But yeah, happy, like I've been saying, if there's anything further anyone wants me to touch on, happy to address that at the end or, feel free to put it in the chat. So the hiring process. So USA Jobs is the main website that the government uses for hiring, and I will be very transparent, and it's the worst. It's literally so annoying. It's people I think sometimes get frustrated with LinkedIn. I would say it's literally worse than LinkedIn. So keywords are your best friend for this. So if you know you want to be in like a penetration role, like using those keywords is very great. Using the filters is going to help you. If you have like location, you know where you want to live, that's going to be your good friend. Most of you are going to be graduating with, I'm assuming, like an undergraduate degree. And so, using the filters to press on early career opportunities, that's going to help you narrow down the scope of roles. um, those would be some of my advice there, but that's the main place a lot of these hirings are going to be. Some of the ones like the CIA, the NSA, they hire on their website. So it differs for everybody, which is a little bit annoying, but I would kind of, try to check both places, USA Jobs as well as always going to the agency website, looking into them there. Special programs. So like I said, I'm part of the Cyber Scholarship for Service program. I would highly recommend these because they are super generous programs that help you get your foot in the door, but also give to you in some way. So like my master's degree program is fully paid for by the National Science Foundation. They give you $6,000 a year for professional development. So last year I went to San Francisco to the RSA conference and used my professional development. You get a one-time purchase of a brand new computer as long as it's under like $3,000, I think. And you can use your professional development on, like I said, conferences, certifications, like these things add up. I know certifications are super expensive. So a great way to kind of get a little bit of a head there. They also provide events for me to meet with agencies one-on-one. So if you're looking to go into grad school, I would definitely look up these programs, the Cyber Scholarship for Service program, the DHS Cyber Fellows program, the Pathways program. Um, these are things I didn't know about, and I actually learned about through an iSchool alum. So it was super helpful for me when I was trying to make a pivot, and I was like, oh, I guess I have always wanted my master's degree, but I guess it was like a two in one for me. I'll get the degree and then I'll get into the government at a higher role or a higher like grade level. So yeah, if definitely something to keep in mind if in the future you ever want to get your master's degree, things like that. The clearance process. So depending on what type of role you want to do in the government, if you want to be in the intelligence community like I am, I'll say upfront the clearance process, like you're going top, top, top. Like there's secret level clearance, there's top secret level clearance, there's top secret SEI. And most people in the intelligence community require you to have a TS SEI clearance with a polygraph. So essentially, they're looking into everyone in your background. They're calling your mom and dad, your neighbors. You're telling them about every time you left the country, and why. So it's pretty invasive. But again, I just wanted to talk about it because when I was in your position, I never thought about this. And if I were to have known beforehand, I would have kept track of like the address of my host mom when I studied abroad in Florence, how to like track that down in WhatsApp. And she's like, girl, why are you messaging me at 2 a.m.? So these are just things if you ever, want to consider the intelligence community or the government, look into, the clearance process. Not every role requires a polygraph. A lot of them are just secret or top secret, and those are pretty simple. You fill out a really long, long list of paperwork. I think it's called the SF-86. It'd be very helpful to Google it so you could take a look at the questions. It I don't know how many pages in, but it's pretty long. And depending on what level, they'll look into your background, they'll maybe call some people, and you kind of go from there. The best thing people say on that is just be transparent. They don't care if you've done things, they just want you to be truthful. And then next one, events and networking. So I'm sure you guys hear this all the time. The iSchool is always promoting events and how important networking is. But if you're interested in certain agencies, I would definitely recommend, or companies, I'd definitely recommend, following them on LinkedIn. There's always online events and in-person events, but these are going to be super helpful. Like I said, I got my first internship and job on campus at Syracuse, and it was a defense contractor, but it ended up being relevant to the government now a little bit. At the time, I wanted to do sports. I was like, this is silly. But it ended up being super helpful for me and I got a free dinner out of it. So I always recommend like, when you guys are already doing the right thing, you're here, but those events and those networking, sometimes it may be a little bit of a drag, but they are super helpful. And then lastly, utilizing the alumni network from Syracuse. I heard about my scholarship program through a Syracuse alum. He was working at Google and I was like, I like Google. I want to work for Google. Called him up, told him about my background. He sat on the phone and brainstormed with me places for me to look and apply and explore and passed along this scholarship opportunity. And now here I am and have a job when I graduate and am in, doing all these great things that excite me. So I'm very, grateful that for that one conversation and um, like I said in the beginning, I just love Syracuse and the iSchool, so I'm very naive where I'm like, people will want to help you. So don't be afraid to go and message people on LinkedIn and don't be terrified or upset if they don't reply because that's gonna happen too. But that was kind of helpful for me in my journey of, landing where I'm at with the job and the scholarship. So last slide in closing. So, like I was saying, I when I was in your position, I was like cybersecurity, boring, like securing systems, hackers. But it could be pretty cool. And there's a bunch of different ways you can go into it. Like I said, you're shaping the future of the country and national security. You can end up in really cool positions. I know a lot of people I talk to in the government, they've traveled a ton. They can't necessarily tell me where they've been, but they've gone all places around the globe, which is really cool if you want to travel. It offers, unique career opportunities with mentorship, skills being built, certifications getting had. Some positions you're able to be like 4 days on, 1 day off. So like my last role, like nobody worked on Fridays, and I feel like no one ever talks about that. But like the defense industry, like they do like either every other Friday off or every Friday off. So that was a huge pro. And I have friends who work in other agencies where like they get every other Friday off. So big thing that people don't always talk about. Start building your skills and network now. So looking into like I said, like if I was being more proactive, I would have taken classes in Maxwell, but I just didn't know back then, and it's really hard to know. So, just something to keep in mind, connecting with people on LinkedIn that are doing things that you want to do. And then the next thing didn't really mention this, but I wanted to put in for closing. So, using AI to help with everything, like with like careers, is super helpful. So, I've have a professor now who's like trying to get me to use AI instead of Google every time I'm going to Google, which like I'm not necessarily there yet, but it's something to just kind of like think about when you're, navigating the internet and the web. I think it can be really efficient for things like looking for companies, jobs, opportunities in cities instead of just looking up like cybersecurity companies on Google. Like ChatGPT formulates like a really good response that alleviates you going through all of those links. So like I have a younger brother who's a senior at Indiana, and I'm trying to help him kind of find a job. And I keep saying to him, like, if you want to work in Chicago, like look on ChatGPT, companies in Chicago that are doing sports and like a business analyst role. So certain things like that, I think AI can be super helpful for you in this process. Or like if you want to use AI to be like, okay, one day I want to be like a consultant. What are classes I should look for at my university? Or how can I be proactive with trying to land a role? So things like that. I just think it's a really good brainstorming tool. And then engaging with experts, like I said. So following subject matter experts on LinkedIn, signing up for newsletters, reading university blog posts. So one thing I realized, like Syracuse has this like intelligence center of excellence through Maxwell. Never knew about it, but like they put out really cool things. I wish I was proactive back in the day to join that. There's a bunch of different like newsletters that keep me up to date on like what specific threat actors are doing now and what hospital got hacked yesterday and how they're going to fix it. So if you care about certain things like that, I can definitely recommend some good newsletters, but depending on what your interests are, like those things are out there and I think are super helpful for you to stay up to date on relevant things in that space. And then lastly, connect with me. I just love to help people and talk about this stuff if you care about this stuff at all. Um, and yeah, I think that's, the end of my spiel and slideshow. So thanks everyone. And if you have any questions, would love to hear them.
Emily, before the students start asking you questions, first of all, I just wanted to thank you for the presentation and the information. It was amazing. I learned a ton about security. It's amazing in just a short number of slides how much information you were able to put into those. There's
Yeah,
actually a
very
lot of things. Yeah, like there's a lot of things to take into consideration. So very helpful. And things that you wouldn't normally think about, like you said, it's no one ever talks about those things normally. So to hear
hmm
about those, especially those students that are interested in getting into cybersecurity, especially for the government, it's very helpful.
Yeah,
So
no, for sure.
I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop the recording.